Hi everyone, this is Glenda Ganzon and welcome to my Human Anatomy and Physiology class. And for today's lesson, I'm going to be discussing the layers of the skin, particularly the second layer, which is the dermis. So stay tuned. Dermis is considered as the core of the integumentary system. So derma means skin. As distinct from the epidermis, which is epi means upon or over, and hypodermis, hypo means below. It contains blood and lymph vessels, nerves, and other structures such as hair follicles and sweat glands. The dermis is made of two layers of connective tissue that compose an interconnected mesh of elastin and collagen or collagenous fibers produced by the fibroblasts. So the first layer of the dermis is the papillary layer. The papillary layer is made of loose, areolar connective tissue, which means the collagen and elastin fibers of this layer form a loose mesh. This superficial layer of the dermis projects into the stratum basale of the epidermis to form finger-like dermal papillae. Within the papillae layer are fibroblasts, which are a small number of fat cells, which is called adipocytes, and an abundance of small blood vessels. In addition, the papillary layer contains phagocytes, defensive cells that help fight bacteria or other infection that have breached the skin. So this layer also contains lymphatic capillaries, nerve fibers, and touch receptors called the Meissner corpuscles. Underlying the papillary layer is much thicker, which is reticular layer. Reticular layer is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue, and this layer is well vascularized and has a rich sensory and sympathetic nerve supply. The reticular layer appears reticulated, or it is like a net-like due to a tight meshwork of fibers. Elastin fibers provide some elasticity to the skin, enabling movement. Collagen fibers also provide structure and tensile strength, with strands of collagen extending into both the papillary layer and the hypodermis. In addition, collagen binds water to keep the skin hydrated, and collagen injections and retin A creams help restore skin turgor by either introducing collagen externally or stimulating blood flow and repair of the dermis respectively. The third layer of the skin is what we call as the hypodermis, and it is also called as the subcutaneous layer of the superficial fascia. The hypodermis is a layer directly below the dermis and serves to connect the skin to the underlying fascia, which are fibrous tissues of the bones and muscles. It is not strictly a part of the skin, although the border between the hypodermis and dermis can be difficult to distinguish. The hypodermis consists of well-vascularized, loose, areolar connective tissue and adipose tissue, which functions as a mode of fat storage and provides insulation and cushioning for the integument. The hypodermis is also a home to most of the fat that concerns people when they are trying to keep their weight under control. So, adipose tissue present in the hypodermis consists of fat-storing cells called adipocytes. And this stored fat can serve as an energy reserve, insulate the body to prevent heat loss, and act as a cushion to protect underlying structures from trauma. So, where the fat is deposited and accumulated within the hypodermis depends on the hormone. Or these are the hormones. They are testosterone, estrogen, insulin, glucagon, leptin, and others, as well as the genetic factors. So fat distribution changes as our bodies mature and age. Men also tend to accumulate fat in different areas like in the neck, arms, lower back, and abdomen. than do women. So for women, they have it in their breast, hips, thighs, and buttocks. So the body mass index, or the BMI, is often used as a measure of fat, although this measure is in fact derived from the mathematical formula that compares body weight, or the mass, to height. So therefore, its accuracy as a health indicator can be called into question in individuals who are extremely physically fit. In many animals, there is a pattern of storing excess calories as fat to be used in times when the food is not readily available. In much of this developed world, insufficient exercise coupled with the ready availability and consumption of high-calorie foods have resulted in unwanted accumulation of adipose tissue in many people. Although periodic accumulation of excess fat may have provided an evolutionary advantage to our ancestors who experienced unpredictable bouts of famine, it is now becoming chronic and considered a major health threat. Recent studies indicate that a distressing percentage of our population is overweight and or clinically obese. And not only is this a problem for the individuals affected, but it is also has a severe impact in our healthcare system. So changes in the lifestyle, especially in the diet and exercise, are the best ways to control body fat accumulation, especially when it reaches the levels that increase the risk of heart disease and diabetes. Let's move on to another topic, which is the skin pigmentation. So the color of the skin is influenced by a number of pigments, including melanin, keratin, and hemoglobin. So let's recall that melanin is produced by cells called melanocytes, which are found scattered throughout the stratum basale of the epidermis. And the melanin is transferred into the keratinocytes via a cellular vesicle, which is called as melanosome. So this is a picture of skin pigmentation. The relative coloration of the skin depends on the amount of melanin produced by the melanocytes in the stratum basale and taken up by the keratinocytes. So melanin occurs in two primary forms. Eumelanin exists as black and brown, whereas the pheomelanin provides a red color. Dark-skinned individuals produce more melanin than those with pale skin. So exposure to the UV rays of the sun or a tanning salon causes melanin to be manufactured and built up in keratinocytes, as sun exposure stimulates keratinocytes to secrete chemicals that stimulate melanocytes. So the accumulation of melanin in keratinocytes result in the darkening of the skin, or a tan color of the skin. And this increased melanin accumulation protects the DNA of epidermal cells from UV rays damage and the breakdown of folic acid, which is a nutrient necessary for our health and well-being. So in contrast, too much melanin can interfere with the production of vitamin D, which is an important nutrient involved in calcium absorption. Thus, the amount of melanin present in our skin is dependent on a balance between available sunlight and folic acid destruction, and also protection from UV radiation and vitamin D production. So it requires about 10 days after initial sun exposure for melanin synthesis to peak, which is why pale-skinned individuals tend to suffer sunburns of the epidermis initially, and dark-skinned individuals can also get sunburns but are more protected than our pale-skinned individuals. So melanosomes are temporary structures that are eventually destroyed by fusion with lysosomes, and this fact, along with melanin-filled keratinocytes in the stratum corneum sloughing off, makes tanning impermanent. So too much exposure can eventually lead to wrinkling due to the destruction of the cellular structure of the skin, and in severe cases can cause sufficient DNA damage to result in skin cancer. When there is an irregular accumulation of melanocytes in the skin, freckles appear. Moles also are larger masses of melanocytes, and although most are benign, they should be monitored for changes that might indicate the presence of cancer. So this ends my lecture about the layers of the skin, particularly with the second layer, which is the dermis, and the third layer, which is the hypodermis, and some of the skin disorders caused by too much exposure of the sunlight. And if you have any question about this lesson, please write it in the comment section down below and I'll be glad to answer them all. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video and for listening to my discussion. So until my next video, bye everyone!